Welcome to a new macro update on this beautiful Thursday. Today it's a very pleasant day for me personally as it starts to rain in the Netherlands, so my hay fever can finally go away a little bit. But hey, we're still here with a macro Thursday. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button down here, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and also make sure to subscribe to the trade letter, which we provide to you 3 times per week. Free content, and it's all in there to provide you with additional information on the markets. And today we will be doing Macro Thursday. We will be discussing everything surrounding Ethereum and the SEC, as it is very important on a macroeconomic playing field. And we're going to dive a little bit into inflation and why Bitcoin is correcting right now, as we can find the information in the charts of why there is so much uncertainty, also due to the Ether case with the SEC. Finally, join our public Discord. Our public Discord gives you a community where you can ask charts, you can ask other things about your positions, you can chat with fellow members, and you are able to engage so you can actually get to know everything that you need to know in the markets. So join it in the description beneath. Also whitelist yourself for the course. Today it's all about Ethereum and it's about Gary Gensler. And usually macroeconomic playing fields are on other points. For instance, yesterday we've had Tesla earnings, not too special. It's earnings season. Earnings season is this time not too great in the sense of there are no big outliers yet. But next week it will be a big week because GDP comes in and it's going to be Amazon, Apple and the other tech companies that provide the earnings. So that's something that we want to discuss next week, as tech earnings are usually the events that are moving markets. And yesterday we've had Tesla. Tesla had pretty as expected numbers, slightly worse due to the fact that Tesla has been going into the minus since, and also Bitcoin is showing weakness, which is usually lining up with Tesla. Good part though, Tesla has been providing information that they haven't been selling any Bitcoin in Q1 2023, so that is great. Now, when we talk about the US and the macro playing field, there's not much further. So we're going to discuss a little bit of macroeconomic in crypto. And one of them is a person who we call Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler has been getting his hearings the past few days, and that was also about Ethereum. And Ethereum is important. Why is that? Well, Ethereum used to be proof of work. Now it is proof of stake. And that has been through the Beacon chain in 2020. That has been through the merge in September 2022, in which we know that there was hype due to the event, and since then price has been correcting. And due to the Shanghai upgrade from last week, in which we saw a positive price reaction since. The Shanghai upgrade results into liquid withdrawals. Lots of fear in the markets, as there was a ton of fear prior to the actual event, resulting into prices falling and altcoins showing weakness, prices rallying afterwards. The question before we are going to discuss Gary Gensler is, was the fear warranted? And the answer is no. A big bunch of Ether got unlocked, as we can see, which was 34 billion. Almost none of them were sold, as only 100 million were sold and an equivalent amount were bought to be staked in the Ether network. And as a result, almost the exact same amount has been deposited into the network as well, as people who want to get into Ether to stake Ethereum are actually doing it right now, as they don't have the issue of staking it for a longer period. It's liquid staking, which means that you can withdraw at any point in time, while previously you had to lock up for multiple years. So the people that are investing into Ether for such a long period have a high conviction, and the ones that aren't jumping in right now probably have a less conviction, but there is no argument for further weakness. So there's actually a bullish case out of Ethereum, also from a fundamental perspective. Now, it swapped from proof of work to proof of stake, which means that there's a topic of whether Ether becomes a security or a commodity. And it used to be a commodity. Now the topic is whether it becomes a security, because if you lock your Ether into the network, you are getting a guaranteed amount of interest over it. That is a potential case of a security. And what would you define as security, and what is actually the difference between the two? This is the SEC, and they define a security based on the Howey test, which says that a security is a contract, transaction or scheme whereby a person invests his money in a common enterprise and is led to expect profits solely from the efforts of the promoter or a third party. Proof of stake, by this logic, might bring Ether closer to a security because its interest pays out require little work and rhyme with the Howey test's expectation of profit. However, it's in the gray area because Ether actually needs those stakers to keep the system flowing forward. And on the other hand, you are the owner of Ether, but there's no way you can actually, if Ether goes to zero, that you can go towards Vitalik and say, hey, I want to get my money back because you have been fraudulent. So that's not the case, but that could be the case if it becomes a security. So what is the difference between the two? Or between a commodity and a security? You can see it next to me. The difference is a security represents an ownership interest in a company such as stocks, bonds and mutual funds. The SEC regulates them, and laws and regulations that specify the disclosure of financial information protect investors. The SEC finds that Ethereum is a security. On the flip side, commodities are physical goods or raw materials that are traded on exchanges. Think gold, oil and corn. They are generally not regulated by the SEC but by the CTFC, and their value is determined by market supply and demand. Bitcoin is a commodity as well. Commodities are often used for hedging against inflation or for diversifying investment portfolios, which we also recall from Bitcoin. Now, there's a difference. We can take an example from it. Gold can be considered both a security and a commodity, depending on how it is traded. When an investor buys gold bars or coins with the intention of holding onto them as a long-term investment, then gold is considered a commodity. The value of gold will fluctuate based on market demand and supply. However, once it is traded on an ETF, which is a gold exchange traded fund, then the gold is considered a security. The ETF shows ownership of the gold and is subject to regulation by the SEC. So that's the difference. An ETF is something based on the actual asset. In this case, the staked ETH is not based on Ethereum. It's not like they create a new product with the underlying collateral as Ethereum. So that's where the confusion starts to kick in. It's going to have an impact on the markets, but what has Gary been saying in his hearing? Let's move towards the interview. So Gary Gensler is the SEC chairman, and in this video he's getting a question which is very simple, which is Ethereum a security or commodity? I'll show you a little bit. It's the chairman, Mr. McHenry, who's saying or asking the questions.
Thank you, Chair Gensler. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ether is one of the most popular digital assets and powers the Ethereum blockchain. Back in 2018, then SEC Corporation Finance Director Bill Hinman stated that he believed Ether was not a security. Last month, CFTC Chair Benham expressed his view that Ether is a commodity. The State Attorney General of New York asserted in a court filing last month that Ether is a security. Clearly, an asset cannot be both a commodity and a security. Do you agree?
Actually, all securities are commodity under the Commodity and Exchange Act. It's that we are excluded commodities. But I would agree that a security cannot be also an excluded commodity and an included commodity. I'm sorry, Chair, just to talk about the Commodity Exchange Act more precisely.
Okay, so do you recognize, how would you categorize Ether then?
Look, I think that the general sweep of what Congress did, not just in the 30s, but as amended.
I'm asking you, sitting in your chair now, to make an assessment under the laws as exist. Is Ether a commodity or a security?
Super simple question.
Without speaking to any one.
I know you've repeatedly said you're not going to speak to one, except you've spoken to one, Bitcoin. So I'm asking you to speak to a second one, the second largest market cap here.
And speaking to the tokens, there's 10 to 12,000. If there's a group of entrepreneurs in the middle,
asking about one.
The public is anticipating a profit based on the...
I'm asking you a specific question, Chair Gensler. I said this in private. This should be no shock to you. I'm asking this question. Is Ether a commodity or a security?
And again, it depends on the facts and the law, and if there's a group of individuals.
I'm asking about the
in
facts and the
middle.
law sitting in your seat and the judgment you are making.
And so, Mr. Chair, I think you would not want me to prejudge because I'm also.
But you have
aware-
prejudged on this. You've taken 50 enforcement actions. We're finding out as we go, as you file suit, as people get Wells notices on what is a security in your view, in your agency's view. I'm asking you a very simple question about the second largest digital asset.
Super good question in which he can't provide an answer. SEC says it's a security, CFTC says it's a commodity. The SEC has been attacking all exchanges, stablecoins and such, but they can't even answer the question whether Ethereum is becoming a security or commodity, because if the answer is going to be a commodity, then all the attacks that they have been doing towards the exchanges can also be switched. This is very progressive, and I think the US is having some serious issues when it comes to regulations, and they are falling behind. As we know that Hong Kong and Europe are also improving quite a lot. Dubai is doing it. So the US needs to pace up in order to prevent themselves from being excluded in the next big tech wave, which is crypto.
What is your view?
And my view is if there's a group of individuals in the middle that the public is
All
anticipating.
right, so let me just ask a second question then. Do you think it serves the market for an object to be viewed by the commodities regulator as a commodity and the securities regulator to be viewed as a security? Do you think that provides safety and soundness for the product? Do you think it provides consumer protection? Do you think it serves the value of innovation? I think no should be a very simple answer.
Super good question, as in, at the end of the day, SEC needs to protect consumers, and they actually are not doing that at this point. If you think about FTX, we didn't hear anything about it until there's a lawsuit, but then nothing else except for attacking other exchanges and stablecoins. So instead of protecting consumers, they're not doing
that
it.
uncertainty is bad, is it not?
And I think that Congress has said that there's one agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission, under this committee.
And you won't answer my question, and you're the head of that agency. So give me a break. Come on.
I'm answering it in the generic because you would not want me to speak about any one set of facts and circumstance.
Okay, so, but you've already spoken. Have you said anything about Bitcoin?
My predecessors and the agency itself has spoken to them.
Okay, but you're not willing to do the same about Ether. Okay, so let me just step back. There's a lack of clarity here in the marketplace. Can you at least agree to that?
I think that the clarity is there. The law is clear.
All
that
right.
There's a group
So
of individuals
let me be explicit about this. The market doesn't see it. Your regulatory actions and the CFTC's regulatory actions say that there's a great deal of uncertainty here. It is the intention of this committee to fix that uncertainty.
That's why it's super important. If they provide Ethereum as a commodity, or if they provide Ethereum as a security, it's going to move markets. Now there's another video which is finding important, which is as a result of this, another congressman has responded to Gary Gensler, his actions.
Gensler, your record of failures to protect investors and abuses of power make it clear that we need to restructure the Securities and Exchange Commission. The failures are many, but let me cite some of the abuses. You average more than 2 rules proposals a month. You provide inappropriately short comment periods. You have unworkable and unlawful ESG disclosure mandates on the market. You have essentially a Hotel California rule for crypto where you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. You have endless discovery with no resolution and no clarity for the captives in the market. You have unworkable proposals for overhauling equity market structure, a de facto ban on crypto through proposed custody rule. You have high staff turnover, unhappy people leaving your office, and unhappy companies and capital leaving our country. To correct a long series of abuses, I'm introducing legislation that removes the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and replaces the role with an executive director that reports to the board where all authority would reside. Former chairs of the SEC will be ineligible under my proposed bill. And this isn't just my take. It resonates across the political spectrum. The American people want democratic access to capital, retail investor participation. You can't just exclude retail investors from markets and claim it's for their own good.
That is the point. If they want to ban retail investors from the markets, They are excluding themselves from the world, and that is going to be very painful in itself. So we all know that the US clients have a very limited reach to the markets. It is not beneficial, and it's good that more and more people in the US government are stepping up to protect investors and traders and clients, and that the SEC is going to have a result out of this. If Gary Gensler gets sacked, it doesn't need to mean that Bitcoin goes moon or so. It can mean that there is a more progressive person in place and that we are actually moving forward, and that is going to fuel the markets even more. There can also be a more defensive chairman at that point, and that's going to restrict Ethereum or restrict the crypto markets. But this entire concept is very important to understand. And what can we have as a result out of this if Ethereum becomes a security? That's what we'll be discussing next. Coming back to the importance of this entire topic, it is super important. If Ethereum is becoming a security, it can push back the markets a little bit because a regulatory framework needs to be adjusted. If it becomes a commodity, you can actually call for the bull cycle immediately, as then there is no hurdle anymore. Security is not the end of the day, as we have been seeing that certain chapters of these or certain segments of this market have become a security already. We also know the XRP lawsuit, which is still waiting for an answer. And when the XRP lawsuit comes out, you can expect the outcome to be very bullish or bearish, or at least bring volatility to XRP. Now, what is the outcome going to be, whether Ethereum is going to be a security? As for your information, an ICO or ICOs in general have become securities as well, in the US at least. So it's not uncommon to become a security. But Ethereum-based associated projects, which are Layer 2s or other DeFi applications or Web3 applications that are on the Ether network, they could be affected as well because they are being built on a security. Altcoins rely on the Ethereum blockchain to function, and any regulatory changes to Ethereum could impact the entire ecosystem. SEC has not made any ruling on it yet. It will be doing it, but if it is classified as security, it would be subject to additional regulatory requirements hindering its growth potential. It would be subject to the registration and reporting requirements of the Securities Act of 1934, which is created in the previous depression, limiting its use cases. Alternatively, if Ethereum is classified as a commodity, it could have more freedom and flexibility in terms of its development and use. This could lead to more innovation and growth in the Ethereum ecosystem. So what I mentioned here is that if Ethereum becomes a security, you also need the brokers to become security brokers through which Ethereum can be listed on it. If that's not the case, Ethereum should be delisted. And also, if Ethereum becomes a security, you can argue that everything that provides staking solutions becomes a security as well. But not everything providing a staking solution is actually a security. So that's why it's such a gray zone and why it's super complex to create a solution out of this. But it is going to move markets, and that's why you need to focus on this topic, and that's why I'm bringing it to you. And there's also another important topic that we need to address on, which is the fact that we still have inflation. And inflation is the central point of topic right now because inflation moves markets and inflation moves the Fed. We have been discussing that last week, but the inflation is decisive for markets to go from up to down and back forward, etc. The FOMC has been deciding that the interest rates are, or the federal funds rate is still going to be increased, through which we've also seen an impact. And we saw in the previous weeks that the yields on government bonds have been so far beneath the actual federal funds rate, which could be a conclusion that either the markets are wrong and the Fed continues to do so, or the Fed is wrong and the market and they have to drop earlier than they expect to do so. That's why we saw the conclusion that there will be a mild recession coming in. They expect at least. So that's the first signal that we're going to get into a rough period. Until then, we're still fine. But once we get into a recession, they need to pivot. And we also know that a pivot is not going to be bullish for the markets. Now, there's some news events coming out, which is the first one. And that is that a FOMC member has stated that inflation is most likely not going to come down to 2% in the next 2 years. True that, it is not transitory and it's going to be sticky, But usually when a FOMC member says this, we will be expecting the opposite, through which inflation can actually go down even more. However, what we also see is that the inflation in the UK has been sticky. For the 7th consecutive month, we have been seeing that the UK has an inflation number of 10% or higher. So instead of that it comes down, it is actually still staying up quite high. It is a delayed reaction, also due to the weakness of the British pound, through which you will be seeing that inflation comes down in the coming months, but it remains this high for now. And that is an argument that we see the markets coming down a little bit at this point. What can we see in the markets? That's what we're going to discuss next. So when we're discussing inflation, you need to make sure that there is the markets and the markets are reacting to data points or to news events. And in this case, the markets have been reacting, as we can see that the 10-year yield for UK government bonds, which has to be in line with the federal funds rate or the rate that the central bank in Great Britain is achieving, we can see that we've had this massive run up, and that resulted into a crash all across markets, correction, and now we are making ourselves a lower high. So we're getting into the resistance point again. This resistance point or this lower high is important to watch, but we do see the inflationary data, and as a result we can see that the yield has been crawling upwards. I don't believe that we're going to continue a lot from here, so usually those corrections are quite short-lived when it comes to risk on assets. We'll get to that in a little bit, but we are seeing a case where the yields are continuing the upwards momentum and have a positive response to bad inflation data, because the higher the inflation, the more likely the Fed sticks to the plan of increasing the interest rates. But then also the likelihood of a recession kicks in. So you preferably want to have inflation falling down. And based on every data point, you will see a reaction in the markets. And that's why the markets are into a very short-term window when it comes to trading. But once we start to turn around again with the yields, it will probably mean that the inflation starts to fall. The 2-year yield on the US is getting into a resistance point. We might be continuing by a little bit still, and then we continue to fall. That is important to understand, and that is probably going to be taken into account today, because today there is FOMC members who will be speaking about the future perspectives. We also get the unemployment claims today. We're also going to get more economic data in the coming period as a result. And we also see from a technical point that we are creating a lower low and lower high here with a bearish divergence, implying that the high is in for the yields. Which means that this short-term relief rally on the yields is only a reaction for the markets to correct a little bit, but it's counter trend. The actual trend is downwards, and even though if we're going to get a recession in the next period of time, it will result into the yields falling down. Now when we're looking at gold is currently stabilizing around the high. It's just a matter of time before gold starts to break out. The more uncertainty there is in the markets, the higher gold will go. So this is going to fuel the markets even more. If you're looking at the DXY, there's the response in which we are bouncing from support again, but we're still making lower highs, lower lows. As a result, I think that we're going to continue the trend, even though we're going to have a slight bounce. Now, when we're looking at Bitcoin, as a result out of this, the weekly is currently correcting based from the levels that we have been getting into. So we are getting into a stage where we are correcting after a big impulse move. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that the trend is over. It doesn't have to mean that my projections are over, as we are still making higher highs and potentially higher lows. Also, when we're looking at the lower time frames for Bitcoin, we can see that there's the only one having a relatively harsh correction until now. The Nasdaq is just stabilizing, while Bitcoin is actually showing downwards pain. European stock markets are still around the all-time highs, so there's nothing to be scared of at this point. What do we need to hold? We definitely need to hold above 27.5. So we need to hold there, or 27.8. If we're going to do that, we keep on the higher lows here, and we can start continuing making the highs just like we have been doing in the previous structure, which inevitably means that once we get towards a higher point, if we're going to get there, there will be a harsh sweep afterwards. If markets turn around, it's going to be a hard sweep, and there's many people that have been liquidated in the previous period already. Now, if we do not hold this level, I'm looking at 24.5 and I'm looking at 21.5 for potential long positions. But I think that we're currently getting into a stage of support, but the inflationary news is definitely having an impact on the markets. I hope you have been enjoying this macro update about Ethereum and Gary Gensler, about Tesla, and about the inflation news that we had in the past week. Next week it will be more important to watch macroeconomic events. We're going to have GDP, but we're also going to have earnings on the major tech companies, and we've got the FOMC kicking in with the data and the decision that they're going to do, whether they are going to pause the hikes, continue with 25 bips, or rally with 50 bips. That's what we're going to focus on in the coming weeks. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you again on Thursday, or on Saturday actually, for the new altcoin update. Ciao!